Synth TV.
Hey everybody, Synth TV, and today we are looking at the new Trident MkIII from our friends at Cherry Audio. It is a recreation of the powerful Korg Trident MkII. We will go over most of its features in detail, as well as a few of the factory presets. But first, as always, a bit of history. In 1980, Korg released the Trident, a powerful synthesizer that was really three instruments in one: a polyphonic analog synthesizer with a dedicated brass synth and a string section in the style of the Selena. Each section had its own oscillators, VCFs or EQs, and could be played separately or mixed together. It also had some unique features, like a bowing effect for the string section, and it allowed users to save their own sounds in onboard memory. The Trident MkII was released in 1982 and included twice the patch memory and other improvements. The Trident packed quite a punch and was used by Joe Zawinul, Rick Wakeman, Paul Humphreys of Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, and more. The Trident was perhaps a victim of unfortunate timing. It came out after popular analog polysynths like the Sequential Prophet 5 and the Roland Jupiter 8, as well as the Yamaha SK series that also combined a general-purpose synth, dedicated brass and string sections. Moreover, by 1982, when the Mark II was released, the music world was turning its attention to digital synthesizers, notably the FM synthesis found in Yamaha's soon-to-be ubiquitous DX series, as well as the growing interest in digital sampling. But because the Trident never gained the popularity of these other instruments, it wasn't as overplayed, and it remains a prized instrument today for both its rarity and its lush cinematic sound. The Cherry Audio Trident MkIII recreates the look and feel of the original, as well as most of its features. Like the original, we have three separate instrument sections: the main synthesizer section, the brass section, and the string machine. These can be mixed together or played individually. Right now, they are all enabled and mixed together. We can turn off the brass and strings just to hear the synth, or just the brass, or just the strings. And back together again. Yes, that big sound is what makes the Trident such an enticing instrument. Additionally, we have various global keyboard and performance controls. We also have separate panels for features that weren't found on the original, including a motion panel with sequencer and arpeggiators, and a full-featured effects section, both of which we will talk about later in this video. Alright, now let's dive into each of the instrument sections individually, starting with the synth section. This is your standard analog subtractive synthesizer with two oscillators, a VCF and VCA with dedicated envelopes, and a modulator. Each VCO has its own level and pan controls. Let's turn off VCO2 for the moment and focus on VCO1. It has three different waveforms: sawtooth, a pulse with variable duty cycle, you can vary the pulse width with this knob. We also have a separate modulated pulse width. The pulse width knob becomes the modulation depth, and we can control the modulation rate with this knob. We have control over the octave, which is measured in standard organ feet. Turn these back, and now let's bring in VCO2. It has a detune control, Dial it in at a low level for a fatter sound. VCO2 has a triangle wave. It's good for adding some low end to a sound. It also has a variable pulse wave. Now a cool thing to do is set VCO2 to sawtooth and VCO1 to modulated pulse width. Lovely! Now let's look at the VCF. This is a resonant filter based on the SSM 2044 chip that was also used in the Fairlight CMI, Emu's drum machines, and others. It has multiple states for low pass, high pass, band pass, and notch. Let's start with the low pass and sweep the cutoff frequency. Turn up the resonance a bit. Up some more. I like that. And now let's try all the way up. We can use keyboard tracking to control the brightness of the filter. Turning it down fixes the cutoff frequency and leads to a little bit of a duller sound. Turning keyboard tracking all the way up allows the cutoff frequency to follow the keyboard and keep the filter a bit brighter. It also allows us to play different pitches on the self-oscillation. Okay, enough of that, Michigas. Turn the resonance down, and let's try the high pass. Lower resonance. We have a bandpass mode. Crank the resonance back up. And we have a notch filter, which removes a narrow band of frequencies from the signal. Turn the resonance up. This is useful for creating phaser-like effects. Go back to low pass. We have a dedicated envelope for the filter. This is a standard ADSR envelope. Let's adjust the envelope for a longer attack and decay. We can also invert the envelope, so cutoff goes lower with the attack and up with the decay. Make the decay a little bit longer and take the sustain down. Adjust release to get rid of that little yoink at the end. Reverse envelope works well with the notch filter. Nice. Back to low pass again. Adjust the filter for a more articulated sound. We have a separate envelope for the VCA. Give the sound a soft attack. Add a long release. Turn up sustain. Adjust the envelope for a sharper attack. Adjust the mix of the oscillators. We also have what is called the modulation generator. This is just a fancy term that Korg used for the LFO. We have several different waveforms, frequency control, and onset delay. We can set separate modulation levels for oscillator pitch, VCF cutoff, and amplitude level. Turn up pitch. Try different waveforms. We can re-trigger the LFO with each key. We can also set it to be controlled by the mod wheel for that standard vibrato effect. Try square wave. Sample and hold. We can use the LFO to modulate the VCF frequency. Square wave. And sample and hold. We can also modulate the amplitude and now both filter and amplitude at the same time. Okay, turn modulator down. Now by default, we are in polyphonic mode. Poly 2 is similar, but all notes are on until the final one is released. We have a monophonic mode. It's good for trills. We also have a unison mode to stack up to 8 oscillators on a single note. Turn up detune to slightly detune the stacked oscillators for a fatter sound. Let's stack all 8 voices. Go back to poly mode. Okay, let's turn off the synth section and turn our attention to the brass section. This is essentially a second synthesizer with oscillators and filter. The oscillators have fixed waveforms with dual octave settings available. We can use both together. The The VCF is a low-pass resonant filter, essentially the same as the low-pass mode of the synth section. Sweep the cutoff frequency, turn up the resonance, way up, turn the resonance back down to preserve that brassy sound. We have a single ADSR envelope that controls both the VCF and amplitude. We now have a more muted sound. Make it a bit brighter again. We can invert the envelope by setting it negative. Turn it back positive. Lower the attack time. We have what are called different trigger modes for the brass section. Right now, we are in the standard polyphonic mode. We can switch to multi-mode, where every key re-triggers the envelope. We have what is called silence mode. The brass oscillators won't sound until the selected number of keys are pressed. This is good for keeping chords and stabs in sync. Press one key and nothing sounds. Add a second. Now let's try a 4-note threshold. Yeah, this keeps those chords nice and tight. I like silence mode, but we'll turn it off for now as we demo other features. Of course, an important part of the brass sound is vibrato. We have two options, the standard mod wheel vibrato. Lower the speed and intensity a bit. Now what we should really use is the dedicated vibrato effect in the brass section, with onset delay, speed, and intensity. Almost sounds like a Leslie effect there. But to get a good brass vibrato sound, let's lower the frequency and intensity. Turn off the lower octave for a moment. And add a little delay before the vibrato starts. Turn back in lower octave. Because of the way the vibrato is scattered, we don't hear as much of it in chords versus solo lines, which is actually similar to the vibrato we hear in real brass sections. Turn off brass. And now let's turn our attention to the string section. This is a classic string machine in the style of the Selena, with fixed oscillators, simple filter, and an ensemble effect. Let's turn all these off so we can just hear the main string oscillator sound. Add an octave above. And an octave below for bass and cello-like sounds. Now this already sounds somewhat stringy, but the real magic happens when we enable ensemble mode. This adds a chorus-like effect that gives it that full-on string section feel. You'll pretty much want to leave ensemble on unless you're specifically going for a more delicate solo sound. In place of a full VCF, we have a simple EQ with high and low bands. Turn high down for a darker sound. Similarly, we can turn up low to bring out that sub-octave. Set back to moderate levels. The string envelope is a simple two-stage AR envelope. Make the attack longer for a slow bowing sound. Shorter attack. Longer release. And shorter release. This will give us that classic disco string sound. The Trident also has a special bowing effect. This adds an accented element at the beginning of each note. Bowing off. Bowing on. Change the tone to really bring it out. Again, this is useful for doing those disco strings. I never get tired of that. And finally, we have a vibrato effect. Once again, we have controls for delay, speed, and intensity. You can exaggerate it like that, or dial it back for a more realistic string vibrato. Add a bit of delay. Bring back in the upper and lower registers. Add back in ensemble, and turn down bowing a bit. So now we've looked at each of the sound engines individually, but the real fun happens when we start to play them together. For example, we can take our current string sound and mix it with the synthesizer. Add some modulation on the synth. back in the brass section as well. Let's re-enable silence mode on the brass. Now, before I continue, I'd like to ask you to please consider supporting this channel so that we may bring you more synthesizer and cultural content regularly. Links to our merch store, Patreon, and Ko-Fi are in the description below. And if you like what you see here, please give us a thumbs up, and please do share your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, let's now bring up the motion panel. We have quite a few features here. You can assign aftertouch to various parameters. We have a polyphonic step sequencer and 2 arpeggiators, and this colorful keyboard for managing keyboard splits and layering. We can set the ranges of the synth, brass, and string sections independently to layer them together or separate them on different parts of the keyboard. For example, set the strings to the upper range, brass to the middle, and synth to the bass. Let's dial in a more solid bass synth sound. And I'm going to attempt to play all 3 ranges of the keyboard to hear all 3 parts at once. Cool, but I'm going to set everything back to the full range for now. There are 2 arpeggiators that can be independently programmed and assigned to individual sections. Let's start with Arpeggiator 1 and route it to the brass. Turn the arpeggiator on and turn off the synth and strings for the moment. The arpeggiator has several modes. We are currently in ARP mode, which plays all the notes in the order set by the direction parameter, irrespective of the order I play on the keys. By contrast, order mode plays the notes in the same order I played on the keyboard. We can set the number of octaves over which the arpeggiator plays. Of course, we have a random mode, and we have what is called leap mode. In this mode, each note of the arpeggio switches to a different octave for wide and changing motion. Try a C minor triad with different keys pressed first to get different leap behavior. Increase the number of octaves for more variety in the jumping pattern. We have some performance parameters: swing, or feel to bring the rhythm a little ahead or behind the beat. There is also a chance control, which changes the probability that a note in the arpeggio will play. Right now, we are at 100%, so all the notes sound. If we turn the chance down a bit, some notes will be left out of the pattern. This adds some more rhythmic variety. Arpeggio 2 has the same parameters as Arpeggio 1. Assign it to the string section, stay in ARP mode, set an up and down direction for the pattern, decrease chance for a bit of randomness, and add a little feel ahead of the beat. This one is in high speed at the moment. Let's turn on sync for both arpeggiators so we can set their tempos relative to one another, with ARP 1 at 8th notes and 2 at 16th notes. Bring back in ARP 1, and with chance probability lowered on both of them, we should get ever-changing interlocked patterns. And now let's turn our attention to the sequencer. This is a polyphonic step sequencer. It has space for 2 patterns, each of which has up to 16 steps. While nobody was looking, we rerouted Arpeggiator 2 to the synth section. So let's assign the sequencer to the strings. Recording is pretty simple. Select which pattern you want to record, and then press the big red button, which always means record. We can play individual notes or chords into each step, and then the sequencer will automatically advance to the next step. Start recording. Skip a couple of steps. And there is no rule that we have to use all 16 steps, so let's change the length by pressing the Steps button and selecting 11 for an 11-step sequence. We can also add ties between steps with the Tie button. Add a tied step here and here. Set the sequencer to loop over the pattern, and let's play what we have. We can add accents to some of the steps, which will give the pattern a little bit more dynamism. Now go to pattern B and record another pattern here. Let's make this one 15 steps. Add some accents and some ties. Now we've listened to pattern A and B individually. Switch the pattern mode to A plus B so we can play them in tandem, A to B and back to A. We can also have A and B each play twice before looping back. we have the same swing and feel controls as we have for the arpeggiators. And once again, we have a chance control. Lowering the chance from 100% to a lower probability will randomly skip notes in the sequence. Our sequences are pretty spare, so we get a lot of open space. We can switch from playing in looping mode to random mode. We will still play 2A and 2B patterns, but with the order of steps randomized in each pattern. Switch back to loop, and now let's bring back in the arpeggiators. Since all three are in sync, we should be able to set up a complex contrapuntal texture among the three sound engines. Okay, turn off the sequencer and arpeggiators. And last, but not least, we have the effects section. There are 4 effects buses, one for each of the synth, brass, and string sections, plus a global bus to all 3 engines together. Go back to the synth bus. We have 5 slots, each of which can be assigned one of 17 available effects. Now, we're not going to be able to cover all of them in this video, so we're going to primarily focus on the effects that are new in Trident. Let's put the BBD flanger in slot 1. This is a recreation of the analog bucket brigade flanger in the original Trident. Turn off the other sections, and let's hear what it sounds like. We have controls for speed, feedback, intensity, and the so-called manual control for setting an offset on the flanger's delay time. To get that classic jet whoosh sound, set feedback and intensity high and keep the speed low. Turn up the speed and turn down feedback and intensity for a more chorus-like sound. Go back to the whoosh, sweep the manual control, this lets us add some controlled motion to the effect. We can assign a MIDI controller to the manual control by clicking MIDI, and then turning on Learn. Select the control. Let's assign my expression pedal to this one. Now, because the expression pedal's range is limited, let's set the curve on this controller pretty steep. Okay, let's play what we have. Let's add another effect, a tape delay on slot 2. This is a classic 201 style tape delay with 3 heads. Change the rate. There are different on-off modes for the 3 heads. Let's move on to the string bus and insert the lo-fi effect. This adds a variety of imperfections reminiscent of old recordings. In fact, we already hear a couple of these features, like hum and vinyl artifacts. Turn up the vinyl crunchies. There's also tape hiss. and tape wow and flutter. Let's hear what this sounds like. Randomize sets all the parameters randomly. Turn down the hum, which is honestly my least favorite part of this effect. Now notice that hiss, vinyl, and hum are constantly sounding, which may not really be what you want in your recordings. Fortunately, the lo-fi effect includes a gate function. Turning it on means that the effect will only run when there's input coming in. Lower the release rate. I don't really want any of the hiss or hum in the sound. Each effect slot has a drop-down menu with various functions for moving and copying effects. Let's move this one to the right. And now we can insert a dual phaser in slot 1. This is a classic 70s phaser in the spirit of the Mutron biphase. We can set speed, depth, and the number of poles on each phaser channel independently. Let's take depth on phaser 2 down and speed way down. Bring up wow and flutter on the lo-fi. Let's bring in a graphic equalizer to tame some of those high frequencies. And now let's go to the brass bus and bring in the dual ensemble effect. This is similar to the ensemble effect in the string section, but can be placed anywhere in the signal path. Brass sound dry, and with the dual ensemble. We have 2 channels of the ensemble chorus effect, and we can set the rate, depth, delay time, and feedback separately. Not surprisingly, this effect makes the brass sound a little bit more like the strings. Let's bring in all 3 engines and their respective effects buses. Yeah, so really a rich, full, powerful sound. Let's go to the global bus. This is really a good place to stick a reverb, so let's bring up the digital reverb. This is your standard digital style reverb with algorithms for room, hall, and plate, and controls for pre-delay, decay rate, and high and low pass filters. Yeah, Bach inventions kind of work with everything. Try the room. and the plate. Once again, let's bring in a little EQ to balance things out. Now you may be wondering where the galactic reverb went. It's now its own separate effect, with this very spacey looking interface. It has controls for decay rate, pre-delay time, dampening, and filtering. Adjust it a bit. And we have a brand new reverb effect called the lush verb. Where galactic reverb is for long tails, this one is very all-enveloping. It also has a modulator. Let's bring the modulator in on decay rate for some spatial and frequency motion in the sound. Now, there is no rule that says we have to have one reverb for all the instruments. Let's turn this one off and assign separate reverbs in each of the instrument buses. Go to the synth bus and let's add the spring reverb. This emulates the classic spring reverbs found on amps and some older instruments. In addition to the standard reverb controls, we have a drive on the input to the spring, and we have a control for the tension of the spring. Looser and tighter. Once again, EQ comes in handy to smooth out the sounds in each bus. Go to the string bus. Let's add a lush verb here. and galactic on the brass. And now, everything together. And there you have it. For the remainder of this video, we will look at a few of the factory presets. We hope that you've enjoyed this detailed look at Cherry Audio's Trident. To find out more, please visit cherryaudio.com and check out the description below this video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to CatSynth TV.